Round 3 of the 2021 Indian Motorcycle DTRA UK Flat Track Nationals comes from the Amman Valley Trotting Track, just 6 miles outside the town of Ammanford in South Wales. This is our 12th visit now to what's been a regular summer haunt for the series in recent years, and it's the largest oval on the calendar, so always a much anticipated opportunity for the riders to flex their muscles. 2 events already complete this season at Kings Lynn and the Greenfield Oval, but the opening night at the Adrian Flux Arena was a washout for the pros, so the only scores on the board thus far date back to that second round 5 weeks ago, won by Gary Birtwistle ahead of Toby Hales and Angus Goff. Back to Ammanford, and that means a return to the traditional qualifying format. 3 rounds of heat races to settle the top 12 and the seeding order for a winner-takes-all grand final. Every rider will appear from each row of the starting grid over their 3 outings, the key to make the top 5 and earn a place on the front row for the final, where the championship points will be awarded. 7 of the top 10 from Greenfield on show again this afternoon on a baking hot day. Track watering really has been a challenge, although plenty has gone down here ahead of the opener. Heat number 1, the podium trio from Greenfield, all lining up on different rows of the grid here, so this one should be interesting. No doubt about it, though, Toby Hales will be the pre-race favourite because he's lining up off the front row of the grid, 5 times winner here in the Amman Valley. Settling in here off the middle row, the number 11, Gary Birtwistle, unbeaten from 3 rides at Greenfield last time out, so he's yet to suffer his first defeat of 2021. And Angus Goff, after the first podium finish of his career 5 weeks ago, he goes off the back row of the grid in this his opening outing. 14 rider field, an opportunity to look at the starting lineup then in full. Going from the pole, the number 19, Jordan Miller, alongside him the reigning youth champion, Jack Bell. Gate 3, the number 20, Toby Hales, and off the outside of the front row, the number 7, Neil McQueen. From the middle row, the number 10, Tim Gregg, 139, Simon Parkin, the number 37, Leah Toklove, number 11, Gary Birtwistle, watch out for him here, and off the outside of the middle row, the number 147, Gareth Williamson. From the back row, the number 500, Rob Meir, making his first appearance of this 2021 campaign. Alongside him, the number 41, Angus Goff, the number 111, Wesley Aegis, 75, Paul Young, and 36, Joe Banks. As well as Rob Meir, Wesley Aegis, Joe Banks and Simon Parkin all making their first appearances of the season here, so this one should be interesting for all of them. The top 12 in each heat will score, so 2 riders will miss out in each of the heat races, 4.5 laps in the heats and then 7.5 in the final later on. As I've been saying, 14 rider field, so it's taking just a little bit of time here for the starting marshal to get them into position. Doesn't look like all of the riders are too keen to line up off the wetter portion of the circuit, effectively gates 3 and 4 here, but the starting marshal now has them settled and makes his way towards the front of the group to put the riders under starters' orders. The riders then will be watching for lights out on round number 3 here in the Amman Valley, which gets underway with a fast start off gate number 2 from Jack Bell. Bell is the first to show. Hales has made a decent jump. Brilliant start for Gary Birtwistle from the middle row of the grid. He's moved Neil McQueen aside and he's going all the way around the outside now of Jack Bell. Hales through up the inside to hit the front, but Birtwistle comes soaring through by the time they get into the bottom bend, and it's taken just 3 turns for Gary Birtwistle to lead the way. Bell, who made the fast start, has already dropped back to 3rd. He's now under pressure from the recovering Jordan Miller. Didn't make the best of jumps off the pole, did Miller. He's challenging now to the inside as they go into the top turn, and Toby Hales has gone down. Hales is down from 2nd position, attempting to chase the race leader Gary Birtwistle. The yellow flags are shown, and Hales will now attempt to recover the machine, but it doesn't look as though he can get it started, and he's going to be a non-scorer in his opening outing. That really is drama for Toby Hales, such a successful rider here in the Amman Valley in the past. The race now on for 4th position, but it's not too much of a contest really as Rob Meir comes scything through on Angus Goff. That was a battle between the 2 of them for 5th position, but Meir, who remember is recovering from the inside of the back row of the grid, didn't make as good a start as the number 41 Angus Goff, but has got clear of him now and is up or in line to challenge the number 93 Jack Bell. So Bell is slipping gradually backwards here. He's been picked off by Jordan Miller for 2nd position. He's now under pressure from Rob Meir for 3rd. Meir sends his back wheel in as they go into the top turn. Bell momentarily with his right foot off the foot pegs and now recovers to what is going to be 4th position. Mir, though, with a lot of distance to try and cover on the two race leaders. Gary Birtwistle has checked out, and Jordan Miller has capitalised on Rob Mir having to come through to make up 2 positions, and he's escaped away in second place. So I don't think we're going to see too much change now in the top 5 positions. Battle further down the order between Neil McQueen and Gareth Williamson over the minor points, but it's going to be Gary Birtwistle who takes the opening race victory of the day to extend his winning run in 2021 and beats his main series rival Toby Hales, who goes down from second position. Second over the line goes to Jordan Miller, then it's Rob Mir in third. Jack Bell takes 4th position ahead of Angus Goff, Paul Young, and then Neil McQueen does see off the attentions of Gareth Williamson in the closing stages to score 6 valuable race points there. But it's all about the battle at the front of the field, with Gary Birtwistle making swift progress. Took him less than a lap to come through from the middle row of the grid and take the checkered flag in just under 2 minutes. 1.5 seconds behind Jordan Miller for second place. Good recovery from the back row for Rob Mir. Then it's Jack Bell, as I said, who claims 4th position. Further back down the order, Gareth Williamson is restricted to 5 heat points by Neil McQueen, and then Joe Banks, Tim Gregg and Simon Parkin occupying the minor placings. Plenty of overtaking in heat number 1, with the resurgence through the field of Rob Mir and a fast start from the middle row of the grid for Gary Birtwistle. So Birtwistle bidding to make it 2 from 2 here as the riders emerge out onto the circuit for the second race of the day. This one likely to be a tougher task though for the number 11. He's got his back row grid slot, so he's got plenty of riders in front of him here to pass, and it's a very strong middle row in particular, so not an easy task ahead of Gary Birtwistle. Important race as well for 2 riders who failed to score first time out, most notably Toby Hales had a DNF, of course, went down from second position whilst attempting to chase Gary Birtwistle, so he has lost points to make up for, as does Leah Toklove, who failed to score in her opening ride. She goes from the outside of the front row. On the inside of her, Paul Young goes off gate 1, Wesley Aegis off gate 2, Gareth Williamson off 3, and Angus Goff off 4. Really sizable opportunity here for Angus Goff to pick up some major points after he scored 8 for 5th place first time out. Strong middle row. Jack Bell finished 4th in his opening ride. Joe Banks alongside him. Rob Mir was 3rd, and Jordan Miller has 12 points for 2nd, as well as Toby Hales, who goes off the outside of the middle. From the back row, it's Tim Gregg, Gary Birtwistle, the man to watch from there, Neil McQueen and Simon Parkin. Just about under starters orders then, and building up towards heat number 2. Watch for Toby Hales from the outside of that middle row. Gary Birtwistle coming from the back, and Angus Goff who'll be the front row favourite. Start marshal moves away, and they're underway. Good start from Angus Goff, but an even better one from Rob Mir. And Rob Mir from the middle row is going to go all the way to the front in the early stages. Sensational from the number 500. Backing the pack up somewhat around the first 2 turns, Gareth Williamson. That's allowed Toby Hales through into second. And around the outside once again on the first 2 turns, Gary Birtwistle. He's already moved clear from the back row of the grid and up into 4th place. Rob Mir trying to capitalise on his fast start, streaks away at the head of the field. The battle now is for 3rd position. Toby Hales has it, but he's left the door wide open, and Gary Birtwistle, for a second time here today, makes the overtake on Toby Hales. Hales will not be denied, gets back around the outside of the number 11, now switches to the inside into the bottom bend at the end of the finish straight to move through on Angus Goff. The number 41 sent very, very wide, and Gary Birtwistle is able to come through as well. Further back down the order, I think that was Paul Young coming through on Jack Bell. So Young got rather boxed out of things in the early stages. That gate 1 position doesn't seem to be working particularly well, but he's got back through now on the number 93, who again was a pretty fast starter. It's Mir who leads, clear of Toby Hales. Still the race is between Hales and Gary Birtwistle. Birtwistle still trying to clamber his way through on the inside line. He's going to try it again coming off the bottom bend. Hales getting a slightly rougher ride, slightly further away from the inside, but it's Mir who looks comfortable up front, looks set to take the 15 race points in the second race of the day, and if things stay as they are at present, he'll be tied on points after 2 completed races with Gary Birtwistle, who's still trapped in 3rd. Into the final lap now. Hales just about covers the inside line into the bottom turn, gets a bit of a bobble midway around the apex, and Gary Birtwistle still can't quite find his way through. Hales has held him at bay superbly for the entire 4.5 lap distance here in heat number 2. They come off the final turn for the final time then, and it's going to be a fine race victory for Rob Mir from the middle row of the grid. That's superb. Second place goes the way of Toby Hales. He too lined up on the middle row of the grid, but is beaten by Mir there. Gary Birtwistle from the back row comes through for third position. Close fight further down the order as Leah Toklove just about holds on ahead of Gareth Williamson. And Toklove and Williamson both lined up, remember, on the front row of the grid. So competitive action right the way through the field as ever with the DTRA. But it's Rob Mir who takes the checkered flag, and in a faster time than Gary Birtwistle managed first time around. So really excellent stuff from Rob Mir, who's certainly going to be a man to watch in his first appearance of this 2021 season for the remainder of the afternoon. Mir wins it by 8 tenths ahead of Toby Hales in second. Gary Birtwistle almost half a second back in the end from Hales in third. Strong ride from Angus Goff and decent points on the board. Jordan Miller, Paul Young and Jack Bell round out your top 7. Further back, Leah Toklove sees off the challenge of Gareth Williamson by just over a tenth for her first points of the day in 9th. Rob Mear's Heat 2 victory then, as I said previously, means it's all square at the top of the heat point standings following round number 2. Gary Birtwistle and Rob Mear on 25 points apiece. Behind them, Jordan Miller, Angus Goff and Jack Bell, all guaranteed their places now in the grand final, courtesy of their points hauls from their opening 2 outings. But they could yet be vulnerable to losing a qualification place for the front row of the grid to the final, particularly with the likes of Toby Hales menacing directly behind them in the standings. Miller, Bell and Hales all lining up off the back row of the grid for their third and final qualification heat. Plenty on the line here, not least the last of the qualification positions, Tim Gregg and Simon Parkin, the 2 riders currently outside of the qualification positions, but both have a front row start here, and it could be Leah Toklove who's vulnerable to elimination. She starts from the inside of the back row, and she's only got a 2-point buffer ahead of them as things stand. Also critical in terms of the top seeding place to the grand final, first choice of starting position for that all-important race, with Rob Mir and Gary Birtwistle on 25 apiece, and both lining up from the front row of the grid here. A tasty-looking match-up between the 2 of them. The grid in full then, Joe Banks, Rob Mir, Tim Gregg, Simon Parkin and Gary Birtwistle from row 1. Neil McQueen, Paul Young, Angus Goff and Wesley Agers from the middle row. Leah Toklove, Jordan Miller on 20, Jack Bell 15, Toby Hales on 12 and Gareth Williamson off the outside. A 14 rider field, and they're all settled and under starters' orders now, waiting for the green light to go out. And we get underway with heat number 3. Missed start there for Simon Parkin off gate 3. It's Rob Mir who's made a good jump, and an even better one from Gary Birtwistle, who again makes the outside line his own around the first 2 turns. Tim Gregg was away well enough, but he's already dropped down into 5th position, but I think this one's going to have to be stopped anyway. Bell, Miller and I think Wesley Agers have all come down off turn 2. Some 4 abreast bunching there in the early stages in the mid-pack, and the red flags have now come out to bring a premature halt to this one, heat number 3. Riders eventually realising when they see the flags, and they have now come to a stoppage, and that is of course bad news in the 3rd race of the day, although it doesn't look as though any of the riders are any the worse for wear. 2 of them already back up to their feet. Jack Bell still in a kneeling position coming off the second bend. Wesley Agers there heading back towards his bike, and we should be able to get back underway with a fairly swift resumption of the action here in South Wales as Jack Bell retrieves his machine, and no doubt Jordan Miller will do the same, and we'll be able to get underway with for a second time of asking. I can tell you that the ambulance is making its way out onto the circuit here on the start straight. But I don't think it's really going to be required, because the riders are all back up to their feet. They're heading straight back to their machines, and we should be ready to go in a couple of moments' time for a restaging of heat number 3.
Medics out onto track just as a precaution there.
Well, of the 3 riders who went down there, Jack Bell is already back up towards the grid. Wesley Agers making his way down the finish straight to join the rest of the pack. All 3 of them waved away the ambulance, so the paramedics are a little bit keen this afternoon, but thankfully that's the first time they've really been called into service. There hasn't been too much drama in any of the classes today in South Wales. Wesley Agers now back into position. I've noticed Jack Bell has dismounted his machine, and that could mean mechanical problems for Bell. After that incident just a couple of moments ago, did see him banging the seat and the fender, I think, in the immediate aftermath. And you wonder whether Jack Bell is expecting to take the restart here, because he's unfastening his helmet. Off goes the helmet, and the number 93, Jack Bell, looks set to miss the rerun of heat number 3, and that could prove costly for him. He was set to contest a place on the front row of the grid for the grand final here today after a 5th place finish at Greenfield last time out. We now wait for Jordan Miller, the number 19, who, as you can see, is in contact with race officials. And he is the missing link before we can get underway with the rerun, because it doesn't look as though we'll be waiting for Jack Bell, who is heading back to the paddock now, the number 93. Bell will be grateful for the fact that he's already amassed enough points in his opening 2 rides to assure himself of a place in the grand final, but it's not going to be on the front row of the grid. Remember, that's what's at stake here in the 3rd and final qualifying heat. We've got Rob Meir and Gary Birtwistle tied on 25 points apiece. They're both going off the front row of the grid in this one, and most likely in the grand final as well. They've got a 5-point buffer over Jordan Miller, who's going off the back row in this one, heat number 3. So they're contesting top seeding spot, first choice of gate position for the final. Jordan Miller will also look up to pick up major points here, going from the back row of the grid though. And Angus Goff from the middle row, he's on 17. But this is a golden opportunity now for Toby Hales to rescue his afternoon in what's been a difficult day for him so far with that full first time out. He's on 12 points and an opportunity to move back inside the top 5. Remember, Tim Gregg and Simon Parkin further back down the order, currently outside of the top 12 that they need to transfer, but they also line up off the front row of the grid alongside Meir and Birtwistle. Slightly different grid positions here off the front row. Whether the starting marshal has picked up on that, I'm not too sure, but he has put the red flags out here. Gary Birtwistle certainly started on the outside of the front row in the initial running. He looks as though he's slotted in off gate 2 here and appears to have got away with it on the inside of Rob Meir now, when he was starting off the very outside. Tim Gregg and Simon Parkin have also switched positions by the looks of things. Wesley Aegis it is we're waiting for at the moment. First time the start marshal tried to put them under orders, I think one of the riders off the back row of the grid was suffering from some problems just getting their bike started, and now Wesley Aegis is suffering from the same. Front row of the grid will be Banks, Meir, Gregg, Parkin and Birtwistle. The middle row, McQueen, Young, Goff and Aegis, who is finally now ready. Toklove, Miller, Hales and Williamson. Only 4 riders now off the back row, with still no time for Jack Bell to get himself back up to line. Hopefully he will be able to take his place in the grand final because he has transferred. 13 riders only then for the restaging of heat number 3. We get underway with another good start from Rob Meir, but again it's going to be Gary Birtwistle who's made an even better one. He's able to command the inside line thanks to his gate 2 position. He's going to force Rob Meir the very long way around turns 1 and 2. Fantastic start from Toby Hales as well. Hales immediately up into 3rd position. So Toby Hales from the back row of the grid making fast progress, moving swiftly past Angus Goff, who was on the middle row of the grid. Goff is in 4th position as they go toe-to-toe up front. 5th place is with Paul Young. Then it's Neil McQueen in 6th. Gareth Williamson in 7th place. So a brilliant start for him from the outside of the back row. And Jordan Miller has not got away at all well. He's now up into, I think that's 9th position. He was down in 10th after the first 2 turns. At the head of the field, it's Gary Birtwistle versus Rob Meir, just as it is in the standings. And Toby Hales trying to make progress on the tail of the 2 of them. Birtwistle getting his wheels in line there, nicely coming off the bottom turn, is able to build a bit of a margin now over Rob Meir, and Toby Hales is starting to close him down. There's Neil McQueen further back. Jordan Miller has now got clear of both Wesley Aegis and Gareth Williamson, so good progress over the course of that last lap from Jordan Miller. Next in line for him to try and attack will be Neil McQueen, and McQueen sitting well up in 6th position here. Back up at the front, 3rd place here is with Toby Hales. Angus Goff has now been dropped by them in 4th position. Then it's Paul Young in 5th and Neil McQueen in 6th. Hales switches to the inside, catches Rob Meir by surprise. Meir appears to be losing speed as this race goes on. He was all over the tail of Gary Birtwistle on the first lap. Now coming into the last lap, Hales has got clear of Rob Meir and into 2nd position, so it definitely will be Gary Birtwistle transferring to the grand final as first seed, as Jordan Miller cuts back up the inside now of Neil McQueen. So Miller through for 6th position. He might have an opportunity here to try and close down Paul Young for 5th in the closing stages. Miller now all over the back of Paul Young, who's tentative into the top turn for the final time. Aggressive on the inside is Jordan Miller. Miller moves across the path of Young and through he comes for 5th position. Excellent ride in the end from Jordan Miller, who was stranded down in 10th position on lap number 1. Close further down the order as well, as Leah Toklove beats Gareth Williamson in the run down to the line. So that'll be enough for Toklove to secure her place in the grand final here this afternoon. But there's no doubting the race winner, Gary Birtwistle, by over 2 seconds in the end, ahead of Toby Hales. Rob Meir gets third, so that's still plenty enough for him to qualify on the front row of the grid for the final. Likewise, Angus Goff, who takes fourth. Excellent ride from Jordan Miller to cut his way through the field for fifth position, ahead of Paul Young coming off the final turn. And Neil McQueen also picked off on that final lap. Toklove, Williamson, Gregg, Banks the other scorers. Wesley Aegis and Simon Parkin failing to add to their total, and that means that it's Tim Gregg and Simon Parkin who are eliminated ahead of today's grand final. So the 12 riders who have made it through then to contest the grand final here in the Amman Valley. Top seed and first choice of starting position goes to Gary Birtwistle. He dropped just 5 points from 3 rides, albeit suffering his first defeat of the campaign. Rob Meir second seed, Jordan Miller, Angus Goff and Toby Hales should all line up off the front row of the grid. That's a good effort from Hales. He manages to get the better of the consistent Paul Young by 3 points. Young, McQueen, Bell, Williamson and Toklove. Leah Toklove doing well to recover from a first ride DNF. She'll go on the second row of the grid. Wesley Aegis and Joe Banks will have last pick. A brief reminder of the championship standings. It's Gary Birtwistle, Toby Hales and Angus Goff who were the podium finishers first time out at the Greenfield Oval. And those points will only be added to here in the grand final in the Amman Valley. Remember, those heat points do not carry forward. They only determine choice of starting position for the final. It's 20 championship points for the winner of this 7.5 lap race. As straightforward as that. Pick of gate positions then for the final. First choice goes to Gary Birtwistle. Second and third place, his results at this venue in 2019. Our last visit, of course, as a result of the pandemic in 2020. Second choice of starting position for Rob Meir. Strong first appearance of this 2021 campaign from the Meerkat. The number 500 looks set to settle in alongside Gary Birtwistle on the inside of him. Birtwistle's left plenty of space on the inside of him here. Jordan Miller, third choice. He's going to capitalise on that as well. Different strategy from Angus Goff, who had his best result of the 2019 campaign here. Goff is going to slot in between Meir and Birtwistle, and that leaves the fifth and final front row choice to Toby Hales, who goes between Jordan Miller and Rob Meir. So the front row of the grid for the grand final will be Jordan Miller, Toby Hales, Rob Meir, Angus Goff and Gary Birtwistle. Now onto the middle row, and it's Paul Young who's first to choose. As I said, consistent for him. 3 7-point scores in his 3 qualifying races. Between himself and Neil McQueen will be Jack Bell. That's great to see. Jack Bell back out onto the circuit after, of course, mechanical misfortunes denied him his third programmed ride. On the outside of that middle row, Gareth Williamson, and the last to settle in, Leah Toklove, doing well, as I said previously, to recover from a first ride non-score and to pick up 9 points from her 2 subsequent rides to move above both Joe Banks and Wesley Aegis, who complete the grid here. 12 riders, as always, in the grand final. We've had 5 riders on each row, though, all the way through proceedings, and that continues on to the final here today. Third round of the 2021 campaign. Grand final just moments from getting underway. It's a brilliant start off gate number 2 from Toby Hales, but Rob Meir is equal to him, and Meir comes around the outside of Hales as they come around turn number 1. Angus Goff with a brilliant getaway as well. Gets between Hales and Birtwistle, but locks up slightly coming off turn 2, and Gary Birtwistle's come all the way around the outside and into second. Charges hard into the bottom bend, but he's got himself in too hot. Gets all out of shape. Moves across the path of Angus Goff, who's been dropped down to 4th position, and Toby Hales has picked off the pair of them. Hales recovering nicely then, blocks out Gary Birtwistle down the start straight, and through for 3rd position now comes Angus Goff, and these 3 dicing for position are boxing one another out, and it's enabling Rob Meir to escape away. So it's Meir looking good and clear up front. He's never previously been a winner with the DTRA. Can he reverse his fortunes here this afternoon? The race at the moment is for 3rd position, as Gary Birtwistle cuts back nicely off the bottom bend. He's got his wheels in line. This should be enough for him to move through on Angus Goff for 3rd position. So Goff relegated down to 4th. Jordan Miller doing well in 5th, and Jack Bell already into 6th position. The 2 young guns close to the tail of their more experienced rivals directly in front of them, but it's Meir who's well and truly broken clear up front. Angus Goff now defending 4th position at this stage from the resurgent Jordan Miller. Miller looking good despite not making the best of starts from the inside of the front row early on. Goff's gone down. Angus Goff falls, and right in the path as well of Jack Bell, who's had to take some evasive action there. That's going to cost Bell some severe time on the tail of Jordan Miller. Those two were dicing it out. They've both been promoted by a single position, as has Paul Young, who is still directly behind Jack Bell at this stage, but that really has fractured the field as Angus Goff just about makes his way off the circuit in time for the leaders to complete another lap. It's Rob Meir up front from Toby Hales, beginning to apply some pressure now. He's been significantly faster than Meir for the last 2 laps. He's going to sneak through up the inside here. Meir is going to tough it out though around the outside. That's brave from Meir, but the inside line will be with Hales into the bottom bend. He's only halfway alongside. Meir though moves deeper than he probably wanted to go into the bottom turn, and through comes Toby Hales to lead it. So Hales is in front, and with Gary Birtwistle, the winner of the opening round of this season, down in 3rd position, Hales would lead the championship unless Birtwistle's got an answer, and Birtwistle's certainly got an answer on Rob Meir. Meir this time wasn't quite alongside enough, coming to the apex of turns 1 and 2 to get back alongside the number 11, and he's been dropped now as Hales comes under pressure from Gary Birtwistle. Meir begins to fade, as he has done in each of his races so far, strong in the early stages. Been a custom of grand finals for Rob Meir as well, but it's 7.5 laps in the grand final, and there is still time for Gary Birtwistle to mount this assault on Toby Hales. Just a lap to go, and Hales is seeing that ground gradually lost as this race goes on, and swallowed up that margin as they come around the bottom turn once again. Gary Birtwistle's going to try and go for the outside here. The 20 on the inside, the 11 on the outside. Birtwistle's through with half a lap to go for Toby Hales to try and respond. The top 2 from the opening round will be the top 2 at round 3 as well. Hales moves his man out coming off the final turn, and it's going to be Toby Hales for his 6th victory here in Ammanford, and his first of the 2021 campaign, and a win that will level the standings at the top of the championship for 2021. Gary Birtwistle looks none too pleased with that final turn move from Toby Hales. He looks over his shoulder in frustration, but what a ride that was from Toby Hales. I thought his challenge for the victory was dead and buried when Birtwistle got round him with only 2 turns to go, but Hales was determined down the inside, moves across the path of Birtwistle, leaves the number 11 no room to make one of his outside sweeps, and Toby Hales takes his first race victory of the day, and he's saved his best till last in the grand final. Hales scores the 20 championship points. Birtwistle relegated to 2nd for 16. Strong ride in the early stages from Rob Meir, but again he fades on the final 2 laps. So it's Birtwistle and Hales on 36 championship points apiece, leaving the Amman Valley. Jack Bell and Jordan Miller move above Angus Goff after his DNF in the grand final in galling fashion for the number 41. Strong performance from Rob Meir. He takes 3rd position overall here today, but of course his first appearance of the campaign, so that's only enough to move him up into 8th position overall. 2nd place today goes to Gary Birtwistle. He looked none too pleased with that over the line, but he's still very much in touch in terms of the championship pecking order, even if there was nothing he could do today to deny the DTRA's very own Prince of Wales. It's Toby Hales, yet another victory for Hales around this half-mile circuit. Really is the master of the venue, and he showed it with that defensive ride on the final lap to take the 20 championship points. Next up, it's another visit to Kings Lynn, and we head to the Adrian Flux Arena with the scores all level at the top on 36 points apiece.